Welcome to the Trainer Talk, where we discuss topics related to health and fitness to help you gain back control of your health and fitness and become the absolute best version of yourself physically and mentally. Enjoy. Bethany, what are we talking about today?
Today we're diving into why we overeat, why our brains are actually wired to overeat, and then basically what we can do to combat that. So what kind of changes we can make to kind of take back control. So we'll kind of dive in first of the whys, and the big thing is our genetics. Over years, since we were hunter-gatherers for 99% of human history, we were designed to, when we see a very high calorie opportunity, we take advantage of it. We overeat, overconsume. You can look at modern hunter-gatherer tribes and they're the same thing. So they will eat glasses of honey if they find a nest, because it's a very rare thing to come across in nature, a very high calorie source of food. Or it's fatty meat. That's another thing, is their brains are they want to only put in enough effort if they're going to get a very high calorie reward or return on it. And so our brains are wired to seek out those opportunities. And there's an equation, and it actually relates to finances too. It's basically the value of whatever opportunity is equal to the amount of calories that you get from it, and then you subtract the amount of calories it takes to go and find it, and then put that over time. So if you can get a lot of calories without spending a lot in a short amount of time, that's the biggest bang for your buck. Yeah. And that's why we've developed fast food, or that's why fast food has become so popular, because it's very high calories, so it's very rewarding for our brain and our bodies find it very rewarding, just because your brain's oh, this tastes good, and then also your stomach sends a signal up to your brain, and it's oh, there's a lot of calories in this. We need to eat more of this because this is going to help us survive longer. And it's that same old mechanism, even though now today we're not moving as much. We didn't have to climb a tree or hunt down a hamburger. They're made for us. We can literally drive up in our cars, and you have to wait 15 minutes in line, and you don't even have to barely lift a finger. You can eat without utensils because that's a hassle, and just eat that food so rapidly. So that's some of the biggest points of it.
And when you bring up hunting and gathering, it could be days or maybe even weeks before they get another large feast like that.
Yes.
Yeah. Whereas today it's a daily basis that we're doing this. Multiple times a day.
All we have to do is walk to our pantry.
Right? Yeah, right. And another thing I wanted to ask about is okay, so if it could be days before we eat, back then our bodies adapted and our metabolisms actually slowed rapidly, right? So you didn't need so much food to operate. So genetically, our metabolisms were meant to be slower so that we could last days before we fueled back up. And we're kind of the same now, but we have an abundance of food and we're way overeating, and that's why we're putting on all this body fat, because we're not burning it off, right?
Yeah.
So unless you're very, very active and your body adapts and your metabolism adjusts, you're not going to be able to lose any weight until you develop that metabolism increase that matches basically what you're inputting. Kind of like what you said earlier, what you input's got to match or be lower than what you output.
Right. The risk versus reward. And our food environment now is completely stacked against and working against our instincts as humans, as we evolved.
Yep.
It's just kind of, it's setting us up to be
for failure.
Overweight into making it way too easy. And that's why I think we have to be careful with these easy, quick solutions, these quick hits of dopamine, or for food is one of them, right? Where instead of seeing that the food itself is the reward and what you're really going for, or it shouldn't be that, but it should be the hunt, the process, the grind to
It
get
should be more to survive, not for
Yeah.
the satisfaction.
Yeah.
Yes.
You should be thinking about your food as the fuel and the nutrients to survive and live and prosper, not, ooh, I want to be satisfied and get this dopamine and feel great
Yes.
for like a few minutes and then do that every single day, day in and day out.
Yeah. So the interesting thing on that is, so the guy who wrote the book that kind of spurred this conversation, The Hungry Brain, he's a doctor of neuroscience, and he was talking about how we kind of have two different brains. There's also another book that goes into this, the science of thinking fast and thinking slow, where there's one side of us that does have the long-term thinking. There's a long-term thinking brain, there's a short-term thinking brain. The short term is like, I want immediate gratification now because I don't know if there's going to be a tomorrow. Like I could get hit by a bus tomorrow. And then it's like, I would rather have the cookie now than to sacrifice for my long term. But the long term brain knows, hey, you're probably going to make it to the next day. Like, you know, you have these goals of, hey, I want to lose weight. So a lot of that comes down to like the motivational states, which is where dopamine comes in. So dopamine, a lot of people think it's a pleasure, like it's released when you have like pleasure, and it's more for motivation. It's also reinforcing. So like you do get a huge dopamine spike when you eat a high calorie, high sugar, like the high sugar fat combination of food, because your brain is telling your body like, we want more of this because it's going to be really good for us long term. Like as long as for survival anyways, like this is a great source of calories. Like this is going to help us survive for weeks if we don't get any food tomorrow. Like your body doesn't know that you're going to have another 1,000-calorie meal for dinner. And like it's just preparing for that rather than like that long-term game. And so you get that higher spike of dopamine. It motivates you to seek out that food again and again. So that's like, you can't ever just have like 2 Oreo cookies and, you know, you end up eating, you know, a whole sleeve because you're like, ooh, that was really good. And that was like a good amount of calories, but your food, like you're not really full and you're like, I have a little more. And then it's like, you get that dopamine, like it remotivates you to eat again. And you're like, ooh, we keep going. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I ate a whole sleeve of Oreos. Like that probably wasn't good. And so then eventually like you get to that point of where it's a diminishing return on like how much dopamine is actually produced. So like you can only have so much of it before you're like, oh, okay, like I'm done with that. And then you move on to something else.
I kind of want to relate that to like if you're watching your favorite TV show, if you ever notice, they always end the very last couple minutes of your show with something that's very exciting and they leave you hanging, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they like leave it hanging like, oh my God, I have to figure out what happens. So then you start the next episode. And then next thing you know, you've been binge watching your show for like 2 or 3 hours.
Yeah.
So it's kind of the same thing.
Yes.
You're giving, you know, society has kind of set it up to where they know what's going to make us kind of binge or you know, crave more and want that dopamine hit over and over again. And to go back, I just wanted to add this in. I don't know if it was a show I was watching or if it was an article I was reading, but going back to like hunters and gatherers, if you think about fruit like apples and oranges, they stick out like a sore thumb. If you think about before there was buildings and anything, if you saw something red or orange, you know, you're immediately attracted to that. It's a bright, pretty color. You're attracted to it. And the reason is, well, after you eat an apple or an orange, you throw the peel on the ground and then seeds spread and more fruit trees grow. So that's their way of reproducing as trees. But apples and oranges are very nutritious and good for us. We get, you know, sugars and vitamins and minerals and fiber. So food companies know this. They know yellows, reds, oranges are very attractive and appealing to us. So what do you see everywhere in stores? Chips, candy bars, all that stuff is packaged with red, orange, yellow, bright colors that make us attracted to it. And so we want to eat it. And so I just wanted to throw that out there because what attracted us way back when we were hunters and gatherers was fruits, which were actually good for us. We know that sugar makes us feel good. So, hey, let's package all of this candy and stuff that tastes phenomenal, this unhealthy stuff, with that same packaging so that we want it.
Yeah, like we haven't lost those same aspects of what we find filling and what we find satisfying and what we're looking for. Yeah. We still have that in us. Now they're just using it as
against
as marketing. Yes. Yeah.
The
So,
marketing strategy.
yeah, it's all about making more money. So that's
Yeah. It's a lot of it is like the money game. Like, it's just
Yeah.
more profitable to have, like, it's easy to add in high fructose corn syrup to a lot of things. And people like to demonize it and say that it's poisonous and whatever. And it's just, the fact of it is, it's just easy to add it to a lot of things, add extra calories, and make you want more of it.
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of what it comes down to. And another thing, another thing to kind of add with that is, like, for the hunter-gatherers, they went and they interviewed like current hunter-gatherer tribes, and seeing what they eat throughout the day. And it's like, okay, meat and maybe some root vegetables and fruit if they can find it, and honey on like very rare occasions, that sort of thing. And they really don't eat a lot of vegetables, which is interesting because the amount of energy you'd have to expend to get 50 calories of leaves, you got to burn 200 calories to go get these leaves. Like, it just doesn't make sense for them. So they actually don't eat very many vegetables. It's more of like, they do seek out like the higher calorie stuff, and that's still ingrained in us. Is we're not inclined to go and eat celery. We kind of have to like make ourselves do that. Like, it's just not in our nature. And it's also in our nature to always want a little more than we actually need.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, for the tribes, they asked them, they're all at a very healthy body weight and body fat percentage, like very normal average. It's like 20% for female is about like their cap, and then it continues throughout the rest of their life. So even like the oldest members, like, they don't really get above 20% body fat for women. It's about 11% on average for men. And they always feel like we're always hungry, and like we could always have a little bit more food. Like, even though they have plenty of food stores there and food available, they always feel like they could have a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
And that brain of always wanting a little bit more, that's kind of what leads us to, like, oh, we have dinner, and then we're like, like, I want something a little sweet. Or like, you just want just like a little bit more, a little more than you actually need. So you're very likely to overeat what your actual body needs in food. And so, like, relying on our instinctual hunger cues can sometimes be misleading too.
And unlike us, those hunter-gatherers have to have that mindset of like, I can't overeat because we're going to need this food for tomorrow. You know what I mean? Like, there's so many other people here that need the same food that I'm eating. Mm-hmm. It's like, it'd be selfish and it wouldn't be good for everybody else.
Right.
There's just that completely different mind frame of
that too.
Yeah. It's like, you can't afford to do that.
Yeah. They can't eat the whole antelope themselves.
Yeah,
they eat their fill. So that's kind of what they do, is they go out, they hunt it down, they eat their fill there a little bit. They'll eat the liver, but then like nothing is wasted. Like, they boil the bones down and everything, like really interesting. Like how much of it they really utilize, and they really value like fat. So like the animal fat, and like they pinch the skin on the animals to see how much fat there is. Mm-hmm. And like, it just kind of comes to think of like our current diets and how much like saturated fat that we get. And, getting animal products is obviously good, and they definitely get a lot of animal products, but we really overconsume with the added oils, the added fats, and then of course the added sugars. And, when we go out to restaurants, even at home cooking, even when we cook at home, sometimes it's very packaged or processed things like, chicken tenders or something, or frozen meals, that really do have a lot of that added ingredients in there. And that just kind of like chalks up the calories, and it makes it easier to like just keep overeating eat more of it. And that's the goal of like food producers. Mm-hmm. It's like, we want you to eat more because you're going to buy more of our products.
Yeah, well, when you're eating the whole natural foods from the earth, from nature, you're going to be more satisfied quicker. You're going to feel more full. Mm-hmm. Yeah, whole foods.
Yeah. I mean, can you picture just having an endless amount of just plain grilled chicken with no seasoning or anything on there?
Yeah.
Like, you can't overeat. Yeah, plain potatoes and chicken breast. Like, it'd be really hard to eat a lot of it. So.
Yes. Yeah, so that kind of brings into like, what can we do about it? So they did a very interesting study where they had like very obese, overweight people. Like this, I think this gentleman was 400 pounds when they brought him into this study, and they gave him a liquid food that had, all the nutrients he could need, like, micronutrients, everything like that, but it's very bland and it's liquid. So there's no texture sensations. It doesn't look appealing. It doesn't taste great, but they're allowed to eat as much of that as they want. And he would only consume about 300 calories a day of that, but he still felt like he was satisfied, which was really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And then they compared that with lean people, put lean people into the same study. They maintained their body weight and ate their like amount of calories from the bland food that like they needed for the day. And they just stay the same weight. So they actually ate their maintenance calories with the bland food. But then the severely like overweight people, they lost a lot of weight. And I mean, this is very extreme weight loss, and it's not recommended to just like have a bland shake every day and then lose a bunch of weight. But that is what worked for him, and didn't feel hungry, which is wild because
we had so much,
Overstimulating.
stores on them, like
Yes.
fat stores and stuff. Like you can survive a really long time if you
exactly
or that obese. Yeah.
right. Yeah. So he was able to like survive on those stores
Mm-hmm.
without feeling super hungry with it being. So it's like, okay, you ask the question, is it super bland foods? Does that help it? And so, yeah, that's part of it is like, if you eat, potatoes, you eat chicken, you eat the whole foods that are a little more bland, they're less exciting. You're less likely to want to overeat it. You might even just get bored of it. You'll be like, I could keep eating, but you're like, I'm bored of this. And the interesting thing is the more you eat those types of foods, the less you crave the sugary foods.
Mm-hmm.
The more you eat the like sugar, very, very high palatable, like fast foods, the more you want them.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword.
Yes.
I can second that. Like, and I've had personal experience both with myself and with clients where, they'll drink water instead of pop for a couple months, and then they have a pop, and they're like, "Oh my god, it was like disgusting. It was like overwhelmingly sweet. Didn't even like it." And it's because your taste buds change.
Yeah.
And when you don't crave or become addicted to those foods after you cut them out for a while, like for us, a protein bar is no different than having somebody else having a candy bar.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Protein bar, like peanut butter and jelly sandwich, is considered a treat for me.
Yeah.
Whereas most people are
Candy.
like, I'd rather have a burger, or something like
Yeah.
that. It's so you're definitely changing your palate basically after you've eaten more healthy foods, whole foods that aren't so sweet, and driving those cravings up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you also don't get the same dopamine spike, that same reward. Like, hey, we need that reinforcing of we need to do more of this. It's like, you ate your fill. You get a little bit of dopamine, but it's not so much that you continue to overeat, that it doesn't motivate you to just keep seeking that same food out. It's like, we did good, but then you get bored of it. There's what is it? It's like, basically, if you eat something that's the same flavor, very similar tasting, you get full just because of that. Like, maybe the first bite you have of a meal, you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then every bite, it's a little bit like less intense. And then by the end of the meal, you're like, okay, it's all right. Like, you started off with it being like, oh my God, this is like the best food ever.
Yeah.
And then you get towards the end, like also as you get more like less hungry, your brain kind of
exactly.
gets through that.
That's funny. And that reminds me of, when I was a kid, and I remember seeing, it was some kind of video or movie or something where the little boy's eating dinner and the mom or dad is like, "Are you full?" And he's like, "Well, my dinner side's full, but my dessert side's empty." So it's like, you could literally not eat any more of your dinner, but you could eat a whole entire bowl of, ice cream.
Yes.
And so that's kind of what you're talking about. Is like, you get bored of that flavor or taste. So it's like, but man, I crave that thing. And you could eat 1,000 more calories, even though you were full and past the point of the other thing.
Yes. And so that's the like different levels of like fullness and satiety levels, like, and that's what like fast food kind of plays on, is like they'll have pair like a milkshake with a burger and with fries. Like, burger is kind of like savory, there's like cheese and maybe a tomato on there if you're lucky, and then so like a little bit more savory flavor, and then you got your fries, which is like it's crunchy, it's salty, and then you've got your shake is sweet and cool and creamy, and it's so much contrast that you can eat 1,500 calories. Like, you take a Big Mac, which is 600 calories. You take a medium fry, which is probably 400 calories. take a shake, which is probably easily 600 calories or so. That's over 1,500
crazy.
calories. And
That's
you can
wild.
eat that in a
So
meal.
the more
and be like, man,
contrast, realistically, the more you're going to eat.
yes,
Sort of too.
yes. So keeping,
So that's where like the dressings and all that kind of stuff
Yes.
can really hit us too. Is
mhm.
putting our favorite
Interesting.
dressings on there, we're gonna eat more of it. Well, if you think about a plain salad, like how much plain salad can you actually eat? But then
Right.
you
Not
throw
very
some
much.
ranch on there, like, ooh, I can eat
Yeah.
twice
You're
as
like,
much
yeah,
now.
I could eat like a big bowl of that.
Yeah.
Right.
So now what we could do is, that's kind of our first tip right there, is what could we do to help people start making that shift?
Mhm.
One of them being probably just trying not to add so many different flavors and contrasts
Yes.
to avoid overeating.
Yeah.
Could be one of them.
Mm-hmm. Like limit that to maybe, if you want to go out to dinner and have a meal that's a little more exciting, like save that for going out and, experiencing a sit down restaurant. Like I wouldn't recommend doing that in like fast food situations or even at home, just because you're still going to be very likely to overeat. But if you keep it out of the house, then, you enjoy it at that meal. Maybe you have some leftovers and then, you carry on with the rest of your week. But most of the time, the food should be a little bit bland almost. And you just kind of get used to it. Like you eat your fill and you're like, all right, that was fine. Like, would I rather had a cheeseburger? Probably. But, this food satisfies my level of hunger.
Mhm.
And so, keeping it a little bit simpler.
And like we said, eating more whole foods too. It's
Yes.
harder to overeat when you're eating whole foods.
Right. Like broccoli. It's
Yeah.
really hard to,
Yeah.
like, nobody's like, oh my gosh, I really binge ate broccoli the other night. I had 5 pounds of broccoli, and it's like, that doesn't really happen.
I mean, even sugary foods like bananas and apples and oranges, like those are sugar. They're sweet. They taste good, kind of like candy in a sense. But you can't. It's not like you can sit there and eat up 6 apples
Yeah.
or 6 oranges.
Even if
it's
you did, it's not that many calories.
right. Yeah, even if you did, one apple is what, like 60 calories, 100 calories if you get a big one.
calories, yeah.
So it's like even if you had the whole bag, it's still only a few
Yeah.
hundred
Your
calories.
jaw's going to get tired before you
Yeah.
get done with
Yeah.
it.
And you're getting vitamins and nutrients and
Yeah.
fiber and stuff like that.
Fills
too.
up your stomach and
So,
everything. So,
yeah, just that would be definitely the biggest thing. Just more whole foods, the
Yeah.
least ingredients as possible.
Mhm.
Yeah, and just being aware too, like when you're done eating, and then maybe you feel like you really want that ice cream after.
Wait a
like,
couple
ask
minutes.
yourself, okay, like, am I hungry enough to grab, say, like another apple or another
Even
handful
chicken
of
or
vegetables
whatever you're
or
eating.
chicken?
Can I
Like,
eat any more of that?
I don't really think I want that. So then you really don't need that.
Yeah.
You don't need that ice cream.
No.
Yeah.
You're not as hungry as you think you are.
Right. You're not actually hungry. You're just craving something.
Yeah.
You want that dopamine.
and that's where it comes down to your food environment. So that's honestly like the biggest tip that like this book has is like having a supportive food environment at home and at work.
Yeah.
So obviously work is maybe a little harder to control than at home, just because people are going to be bringing in stuff and whatnot. But have a conversation with your coworkers and just I mean I would bet that a lot of them would be open to the idea of like, hey, let's work on having healthier food and healthier food environment. Let's keep, the cookies and pastries and whatever else that people tend to bring in. Like, let's try and keep that out of here, or let's at least put it in like the cupboard so it's not out for everybody to see.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Because the more if you see it, you're way more likely to like grab it. And then at home, like if you just don't keep the ice cream at home, you don't actually crave it.
Yeah.
You might crave it a little bit, but then are you going to go up to the store or go out and
Make it
go
more
it?
inconvenient to get
Yes.
those things.
So make everything have effort barriers. So like have an effort barrier before those high calorie foods, like shelled nuts and like fruit that you have to peel, like
Yeah.
instead of like pre-cut or whatever. Like if you have a little bit of a barrier to it, then like that effort to reward is like weighed in your brain. You're like, okay, but I want to drive uptown. Like I got to get in my car and I got to put shoes on. Do I really want to go and get ice cream? It's like, well, no. And so I'll just stay home and continue watching TV or something.
Yeah.
But if you have it in your house and it's in your freezer and you're like, oh, some ice cream sounds good. And you're like, okay, I'll go make a little scoop. It's way easier to get that ice cream. And so your brain's always weighing these things of like, is the effort worth the reward? Whether it's food or in general. And so our brain's constantly going through that.
And it's kind of funny how you said like the shells on the nuts, like
Yeah.
That's not much effort, but even that little amount
yeah.
is enough to steer us away from going and getting the bag and like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't just like pistachios. You can't just take a handful
Yeah,
and throw
I
them
was
in your
gonna
mouth.
say that.
Yeah.
Like the work you have to do to like peel the pistachios, you're like, okay, I'm done with that. You're like, I'm gonna move on. But you get like your fill of maybe an ounce or so, or even less, and you're like, okay, like that's good. You don't like keep wanting more.
Yeah.
And then your brain actually unconsciously knows a food isn't available if you don't have it in the house. But if you have it in the house, subconsciously it knows it's there, and so you're gonna want it. Like even if you, so say even you're like, okay, I'm gonna put candies, like I'm gonna put my favorite candy, like I'm gonna get some, but I'm just gonna put it in like the top shelf at home, right? Your brain still knows that it's there. And like once your brain knows it's there, it wants it.
Yep.
And then that's when it's like, ooh, like that would be really good.
Mhm.
But if it's not there, your brain knows like, well, it's not around, so I'm not gonna think about it.
100%. Because like we went to Frankenmuth a couple weekends ago with a family trip, and Katie and I got like different flavors of popcorn in Frankenmuth, like dill pickle popcorn, and there was other stuff, caramel, chocolate. You know, they have like a million different kinds of popcorn, and then we got fudge, so like Mackinac Island fudge, and so I know it's in the house, and so normally I would have. You know, maybe like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, which isn't great, but it's a decent snack. Or maybe I make oatmeal with blueberries and walnuts and honey. Or maybe I'll just have like a protein bar. But since I know that that was in the house, I would go to the fudge first and the popcorn. I'll eat all that first, and then I'll go to the next, like go back to my old stuff because it's not there anymore. So if you just simply remove that stuff from your environment and keep just, it doesn't have to be super, super healthy like green light food, but if it was just something that's a better choice and have that as your snack or treat, like a protein bar, or, you know, maybe it is making a sandwich or something like that. Like it's a better choice. It's going to be much more beneficial than having a bunch of like chips and candy in the house. Even if it is a little bit, you're still going to eat it first.
Mm-hmm. Another tip, which I thought was pretty interesting, like obviously we always say, you know, higher protein intake, make sure you're getting your sleep and regular physical activity. But then not combining carbs and fats in meals was interesting. Because if you think about it, that's the rewarding combination. Is if you combine sugar and fat, those are the most rewarding foods.
Mm-hmm.
Think like cake, ice cream, cookies, like that all has a bunch of sugars and fats. And so our brain like just knows that that's very highly rewarding. And so, you know, either if you do have a healthy serving of fats with the food, like maybe you have whole eggs and avocado for your breakfast, like don't add like a carb serving with that. And it won't have that same effect of wanting to keep eating more.
Okay.
So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Or just maybe pair one of them with a protein instead. So like a protein and a carb or a protein and a fat would be a good combination rather than a carb and a fat.
Right, exactly. Like
Cool.
protein's
more satiating anyway.
Yeah, like you do like your protein, your vegetable, and then you do your carb serving. But, you know, be careful on adding your olive oil. Even if it's healthy fats, it's still that rewarding combination, which I thought was really interesting. And go easy on the salt too, because that salt, sugar, fat combo, those three are like the trifecta of making us overeat. So
cool.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Now I know what to do to eat more.
Yes. And on the opposite spectrum, if somebody wants to gain weight and eat more, you do the complete opposite of what we said. Less whole foods, more carbs, fat, and salt combination. Switch it up. Keep it interesting.
You got to keep in mind though, I'm very, very active. We work out hour and a half a day, 5 days a week. So, I mean, you can get to that point. You could also use it as motivation. Like, oh, I want to eat a lot. Well, match it up with your exercise. Start exercising an hour or two a day. You can eat more and enjoy more food. I mean, they go hand in hand.
Yeah.
If you don't want to exercise, guess what? You got to eat way less.
Yeah.
It's just the way it is.
Yeah.
It is.
That's what it comes down to.
It's your budget. It's like if you want to spend more money, then you got to make more money.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's good.
Another thing I want to say is we really need to shift this mindset back to what we were when we were hunters and gatherers. Is like you're not, living to eat. You're eating to live. You need to start looking at food as I need to eat this food to survive. I need this food for energy so that I can do the work that I need to do every day, so that I can function properly every day. We aren't on this earth to eat a bunch of food and feel good for a few seconds every bite we take. That's not the point of this life that we've been given. You know, so if you just frame your mind in that way, because I one of my biggest pet peeves is when people say like, I just get so bored eating the same thing.
Good,
It's like,
because then you won't overeat it.
yeah, well, yeah, good. You won't overeat it for one, but two, it's like you're not eating to be. It's not a freaking hobby. You know, it's something you have to do to survive.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's not a game or a hobby. You know, it's a necessary, essential part of life. You know,
And after you do that for a while, you'll feel so much better.
yeah.
You won't
Exactly.
be as
You're gonna
inflamed.
feel
And you won't
way
even
better.
want it.
You won't even crave it if you do it for a couple months straight.
Yeah. Your
You
gut
know,
will feel
think about
better.
if people said that for their job. Like, how many people would just quit their job? Oh, I really like it, but I just kind of get bored with it. So I think I'm going to try something else out. And people are switching jobs every month.
Yeah.
It never freaking happened. Not the way the world
You gotta
works.
do the boring work.
You got to do the boring work. That's right.
You gotta have your excitement sometimes. Like,
Yeah.
eat your cake occasionally on
Yeah.
birthdays. But other than that, no.
Right.
Fortunately, my family has a lot of birthdays.
Yeah. If you want more birthdays and more cake, have a
Yeah.
bigger family, I guess.
Well, that's another thing, though, too, is like a lot of people stress out about the holidays and birthdays and stuff like that because they're like, oh, I'm going to fall off track again. I got to eat, I'm going to eat unhealthy. And they kind of like, they put themselves down. Like they're not looking forward to it. They can't be fully present and enjoy it because they're worried about eating unhealthy. Whereas like for us, it's like we eat relatively healthy 80% of the time. So on holidays, birthdays, like I'm eating the most junk food out of anybody, and I freaking love it because I don't eat that stuff on a regular basis like everybody else does. Like,
so it is a treat for you.
yeah, celebrations should be exactly what they for. They're celebrating. You should. That's where the treats and the cakes and that kind of stuff comes into play.
Mhm.
Not every single day of your life, because then it's no longer a celebration. It's no longer
Yeah.
has any meaning to it.
Right. I had another point to say, but I forgot it now.
Well, if you think of it, that's probably
Maybe
good
should be.
anyways. But
Yeah.
So, couple tips. Review.
Couple
What
tips.
are your main
Eat
tips?
whole foods.
Okay.
More
Yes.
whole foods.
Whole foods. And like
Less
that-
contrast.
yeah, and you can even do it really easily too. Of just like you can get the frozen vegetables. You can like batch prep a bunch of chicken, and then you get like minute brown rice, or packages of the brown rice. Like it's very simple and easy to do. Keep it boring. Keep it simple.
I was gonna say the golden nugget here is keep it boring.
Yeah.
If you're bored with your eating, good. Keep freaking going.
Yeah,
Because you're gonna be successful in the long run if you keep doing it.
yeah, and like you can add like herbs and spices and stuff like that.
Salt and pepper.
Yeah.
But yeah,
S&P.
yes, just be careful with the salt and combining the salt, sugar, fat. Like that combination, like does really drive us to overeat. So be careful. In
Be
those.
mindful of your environment.
Yes, environment.
Yes.
Clean up your environment would be another big
Yeah.
tip.
Yes.
Keep it out of the house.
If you eat too much of it, just take.
If you want a snack, you've got to drive and go get it.
Make it
Yes.
inconvenient.
Make it inconvenient.
Mhm.
These are all for your best benefit, people.
Yeah.
So,
We use them all. So.
Yeah. Seriously, like almost every weekend. We haven't done it in a while, actually. We've been busy, but that's why we go to Dairy Queen to get a Blizzard
Mhm.
a couple times a month on a Saturday. or
Well,
Sunday.
sometimes it just doesn't like.
Sometimes it
you just
doesn't
got back
happen.
from your trip. You're super tired, and you're like, I don't wanna.
Yeah, well, and I ate desserts there, so it's
Oh,
sometimes if I like have, Frankenmuth, we got fudge and popcorn, so I didn't do that. So it's
Yeah.
not like I'm doing both either.
Right.
It's all
Yeah.
moderation.
Yes.
It's controlled moderation.
Mhm.
Yep. All right. Well, awesome. Hopefully this was helpful. I know I learned a lot
Yeah, me too.
from the science.
Read more. You learn more.
Yeah.
Bethany. So, all right. Until next time, stay healthy, and we'll see you soon. Thanks again for tuning in to the Trainer Talk. If you are ready to gain back control of your health and fitness, we would love to sit down and chat with you to see if we can put together a plan for you. All you have to do is head to taylorhutchinsonfitness.net and book a free consult. Again, make sure you like and subscribe if you like the video, and hopefully we'll see you soon.